Welcome back to Movie Book Club, where I'm covering the Iliad in preparation of the Odyssey, releasing in 7 weeks. I'm Indian Jones, and today we're covering books 17 through 20. Book 17, let's do it. Wow, we really get thrown into the aftermath of Patroclus' death, and a fight ends up breaking out over his body. It literally seemed like a tug of war with everyone wanting a piece of him, and mainly the armor, to make sure that they got their trophies. Euphorbus was the first person who took Patroclus down, so he tries and gets the armor off of Patroclus' body to get his trophies, but he ends up getting killed by Menelaus in the process. Damn, I didn't realize Menelaus was so paternal over Patroclus. After seeing Patroclus' death, there was a line saying that Menelaus looked at Patroclus like a mother cow losing her calf. There's actually so much animal imagery throughout this book in particular. But anyways, Hector comes rushing in to avenge Euphorbus' death, but Menelaus asks Ajax for some help, and they're able to hold the line against the Trojans and prevent anything bad from happening to Patroclus' body. But they weren't able to rescue the armor because Hector was able to get to that first. I don't understand how Hector had enough time to take off Patroclus' armor and put it on himself without anyone stopping him on the battlefield. I guess it's also Achilles' armor, not Patroclus' armor, but you know what I mean. Yeah, it's surprising he was able to get the armor on because Menelaus and Ajax were described as menacing on the battlefield. It's crazy though that they were working so hard to get Patroclus' body back for Achilles, even though Achilles has treated the Greek side so poorly throughout the whole war. It's actually wild how hard the whole Greek side was fighting to avenge Patroclus when there have been so many people dying left and right, but Patroclus' death is the first one that feels like it actually had a widespread impact, even though him and Achilles have been off the battlefield for so long. But I think I get it. Patroclus is maybe the only character in this whole story that seemed genuine, likable, and cared about people and had desires beyond just obtaining glory. He was also pretty well-rounded. He was a beast on the battlefield, yet good at cooking and healing people, so I can get the love for Patroclus. Anyways, Glaucus yells at Hector for not taking Patroclus' body along with the armor that he stole off of him, because maybe they would have been able to use the body as leverage for getting Sarpedon's body back. And then Glaucus calls him out for just wanting the armor to sit there and look pretty than actually do what would be best for the war and for both sides to grieve properly. Getting the body back is a huge sign of respect and considered necessary for the grieving process and to give the body a proper farewell. I did find it pretty funny that Glaucus approached Hector with the same line Hector has been hitting Paris with: "You look pretty but don't know how to deal with war." Hector ends up lashing back at Glaucus, but deep down I think he knows he's right, because he goes back onto the battlefield and promises whoever's able to bring back Patroclus' body, no matter the means, will get half of the trophies. And then he mentions how he wants to chop Patroclus' head off and give his body to the Trojan dogs. Zeus says though that Hector isn't thinking about death at all, but death is near him, and kind of ridicules Hector's actions, saying he killed the comrade of Achilles and wrongfully took Achilles' weapon and dressed in his armor. Theoretically, he shouldn't get that right because he didn't kill Achilles, he killed his friend Patroclus, and the armor he's now wearing isn't truly earned because it's not the armor's owner he killed.
It answered to somebody else. When he killed Snape, he thought the wand would become his. But the thing is, the wand never belonged to Snape.
But then he lets it slide, saying that Hector's gonna die anyway, so he might as well give him some strength in his final moments. Patroclus' death gets more Greeks to show up on the battlefield, and that ends up driving Hector and the Trojans further to the wall, so Apollo had to come in and intervene. Apollo convinces Aeneas to rally the Trojan men that were looking to retreat and gets them to keep fighting to get the body of Patroclus back. I honestly lose it every time I see Aeneas' name on the page, because I always read it as Anus the first time. Hector tries to steal Achilles' horses and tries to kill the chariot driver named Automedon.
Autobots, roll out! We roll.
Zeus actually ends up giving Automedon some strength so he doesn't go down easily, but like, dude, Zeus, pick a side and give strength to someone and stick to it. But anyways, this allows Automedon to dodge Hector and take down another Trojan and take that guy's armor. Supposedly, killing that Trojan helped ease the grief of losing Patroclus a little bit, but not enough because of how perfect Patroclus was. Meanwhile, Athena lends Menelaus on the Greek side some power, and she's more keen to do so because Menelaus mentioned her first in his prayers. And then you have Apollo obviously favoring Hector on the Trojan side. Menelaus also sends Antilochus to go to Achilles to finally let him know what had happened to Patroclus, and I'm sure we're gonna see his wrath. And the last line of this book mentions how there's no end to this war. Alright, let's talk about book 18. When Antilochus finally gets to Achilles and is able to tell him about Patroclus' death, as we expect, he loses control and goes into full rage mode. It's pretty crazy that even the women that Achilles and Patroclus enslaved as their trophies ran off crying in grief when they found out about Patroclus' death. Maybe that's just more evidence of how great of a guy Patroclus really was. But Achilles goes in a rage and screams for the whole world to hear, and it results in his mom Thetis hearing him and finding out about the misery he's in. Thetis shows up with her sisters to figure out what could be hurting her dear son, and Achilles tells her about the death of Patroclus. He mentions that Patroclus' death destroyed him. He said, "I loved him more than any other comrade. I loved my friend as if he were part of my own body." And Thetis was weeping for Achilles because of all the suffering he was facing and trying to figure out what he could have done to deserve this. But Achilles hasn't even been on the battlefield. He's technically only dealt with one casualty so far, even though it was a pretty big death compared to the others. Achilles insists to his mom that he's going to avenge his best friend's death and make sure he kills Hector, even though he knows if he chooses life on the battlefield, he's going to get glory, but he's destined to die living a short life. Throughout the book, he keeps referring to Patroclus as his own head and equal to his own life. He won't be able to live amongst people or make any new friends unless he's able to get revenge on Hector first, and after that, he'd gladly welcome death.
He then greeted death as an old friend and went with him gladly, departing this life.
If that isn't romantic, I don't know what is. Thetis tells him, don't use up all your lifespan now. If you kill Hector, you're surely going to die soon after. And Achilles is like, I wish I was dead now. I couldn't do anything for Patroclus or any of the other Greeks while I was just sitting here. I accomplished nothing, even though I'm better than all the other Greeks combined. Glad he's finally coming to his senses. A little cocky, but still coming to his senses. Eventually, Thetis agrees to let Achilles go back to battle, but before he goes, she insists he wait a day so she can get Hephaestus to make a new set of godly armor for him. It's interesting though that Thetis, when convincing Hephaestus to make the armor, uses a story of how Zeus has been awful to her and made her fall in love with someone she didn't want, which is obviously a fair complaint. But she also conveniently leaves out that she was the one who asked Zeus to bring glory to Achilles by making the Greeks look bad, and that in turn meant that Patroclus had to die. After that spiel, Hephaestus starts working on the sickest suit of armor anyone could ever ask for, and honestly, he seems like a pretty nice guy. The description of Hephaestus making the armor sounded like an epic story on its own and was an awesome read. Meanwhile, Hera sends a message via Iris message commanding Achilles to go to the battlefield, and while he's hesitant to go without armor, he does end up going to show face like Hera wanted. And just by his appearance alone, he was able to inspire the Greek side and scare the Trojans into leaving Patroclus' body alone. On the Trojan side, Polydamas does his best to convince the Trojans to retreat fully now that they know Achilles is going to start fighting, but Hector is too proud for that. This guy Polydamas actually has some good ideas. One could claim that he's been wiser than Odysseus so far. Hector insists he's not a coward and stupidly ends up getting the support from other Trojans. On the Greek side, Achilles makes sure that Patroclus' body's being treated well and getting cleaned, but Achilles doesn't want him to have a proper burial till Hector is finally dead. Let's talk about book 19. It starts off with Achilles getting a hand delivery from his mother with the amazing armor Hephaestus had made for him. And she promises that she'll look after Patroclus' body while Achilles re-enters the battlefield. Before he returns to the fight, Achilles calls a meeting to meet and strategize with all the other Greek commanders, and we have all the big Greek players show up. Agamemnon and Achilles finally get a chance to connect and hash out the moment that essentially led to every bit of conflict in this epic so far, which was Agamemnon taking Briseis away from Achilles. They're able to overcome their differences for the most part, but I don't know if it's because either side actually means it or if it's out of necessity. Agamemnon still insists that Achilles will get all the gifts and trophies that they had promised him in book 9 that Achilles had initially turned down, and Agamemnon mentions that he can have Briseis as well as long as he gets back from the battlefield. Maybe Agamemnon knows that Achilles is destined to die soon, so he can just promise him anything and it won't matter. It's wild that apparently even Briseis was mourning for Patroclus, remembering how kind he was, even though she was only a trophy that belonged to Achilles specifically. Just goes to show you how everyone loved Patroclus. Achilles wanted to go to battle immediately, but Odysseus actually has a decently smart idea that everyone in the army should eat first so they actually could fight hard. And Achilles still keeps his stubborn streak, no surprise there, and says that he's not going to eat anything until Hector is dead. And it makes sense because apparently he feels like he lost a son or that he lost his dad, and the whole time Achilles thought Patroclus would be the one returning home safely eventually, and Achilles would be the one that died first. Yet again, Zeus feels bad for Achilles and tells Athena to load Achilles up with ambrosia and nectar so he could actually fight without eating a proper meal. That seems like a cheat code. Later, Achilles puts his armor on and gets on his chariot, and it's weird. He blames his horses for leaving Patroclus on the battlefield to die. Like, dude, you could have been out there yourself and actually protected him. But one of his horses replied and said that it wasn't him, but a god who let Patroclus die, and that the same thing is going to happen to Achilles. And more specifically, that he's going to die at the hands of a human and a god, just like Patroclus. But Achilles already knows what fate has written for him and knows that once he starts fighting for his friend, he essentially seals that he's going to die young. 20th book, here we go. While the Greeks and Trojans are in the midst of preparing for battle, Zeus summons all the gods to Mount Olympus. Zeus knows that if Achilles entered the battlefield in his current state with that much rage, it would be And it would be too early for Troy to be brought to its end. It's not fated for that apparently, at least not yet, and it would account for more glory than Achilles was allotted to receive in his lifetime. So Zeus removes his ban on gods, altering the outcome of the battle, which wasn't really a ban that held up, to be fair. There were still strings being pulled, but he gave an explicit go-ahead to allow the gods to interfere. It's interesting though that Zeus actually wanted the gods to interfere. I'm surprised he wasn't confident enough to control the outcome of the battlefield on his own like he's already been doing throughout the Iliad. The gods choose their sides and overlook the team they're supporting and rooting for. And people choosing a side to root for during the Super Bowl. Apollo takes Zeus's words to heart and for some reason really encourages Aeneas on the Trojan side to challenge Achilles to battle, and Aeneas is trying to dodge all the smoke. And it's understandable. Why should he be the one to take on swift-footed and godlike Achilles? That's a disaster waiting to happen. The way Aeneas described him, it made it seem like Achilles has aimbot. Eventually Aeneas relents and then proceeds to get destroyed by Achilles. Achilles is about to kill him, but Poseidon intervened and decided to save him because he knows Zeus favors Aeneas and his family. Since when does Poseidon want to be considerate towards Zeus? It seems like it's a bit out of character. Poseidon is just like his brother Zeus though, can't decide which side he likes more. I guess there are a lot more layers to this battle than just Trojans versus Greeks. But with Aeneas taken away from the battlefield, this opens up the door for Hector to want to go and challenge Achilles, but I guess Hector is special because Apollo advised him to wait for Achilles to come to him so they can fight away from the front lines when Achilles has less energy. Guess Apollo didn't like Aeneas as much as he liked Hector, because it seems like Apollo was ready to let Aeneas die but didn't want that to happen to Hector. Regardless though, Hector gets super impatient watching Achilles cut through the Trojans like butter, so he ignores Apollo and decides to take him on anyways. Then everything seems like it's lining up for the battle of a century, but the fight ends up going pretty poorly for Hector and Apollo has to come to his rescue yet again. And Achilles calls him out saying, "Apollo had to intervene to save you, you can't fight me at all." And then we get some crazy imagery from Homer as Achilles goes on even more of a tear against the Trojans. I'm talking about marrow bursting from vertebrae, tendons being sliced, and the battlefield getting doused in dark blood. And Achilles is left looking for more glory on the battlefield as he searches for his next victims. He was in a rage no one could snap him out of, and his hands were drenched in gore. The stretch of books in the Iliad from 17 to 20 has been crazy. I can't believe we only have 4 more books before it ends. Damn, maybe this is the actual peak of the Iliad. The battle sequences here have been insane. And it's good to finally see pouty ass Achilles on the battlefield. I would be so mad if I were the Greeks. You're telling me they could have had this amount of strength on the battlefield the whole time?
Why was she up there all this time?
Since we just finished another stretch of 4 books by getting through book 20, I think we should update my power rankings. Missing the list completely is Agamemnon. This guy seems so useless and is basically just a gossip. But I think if I had a top 5 right now, I'd have to have Odysseus last. He's always around and has some strategy, but I feel like he hasn't done enough to be higher. Next, I have Menelaus in 4th. He was there on the front lines and doing work, which is good to see because he's the one who all the Greeks are fighting for essentially, and it's his wife that they're trying to get back. In 3rd, this was close between 3rd and 2nd, but just missing out on 2nd is great Ajax. This is the guy everyone calls for on the Greek side when things get rough, so he has to get some love and go up in the rankings a little bit. And in 2nd, we have Achilles. It took him long enough to show up, but when he did, he showed up big and took accountability for his mistakes and for shirking away from the battle. And in 1st, we have Patroclus. No, I'm just kidding. Although post-mortem, he's done pretty well for the Greek side. He united them all even further because of how well liked he was and got Achilles back on the battlefield. But no, actually in 1st, we have Hector. He definitely lost a few points and the gap between 1st and 2nd isn't as large as it used to be, but he's still atop the power rankings. Call me Apollo because I got a soft spot for Hector. All right, that's a wrap. I will catch you guys next week for the final 4 books of the Iliad. See ya.